Thanks for joining us for another Creating Dementia Solutions. I'm Richard Pyatt. It's a Miles for Memories program. You're seeing it on Access Vision and maybe hearing it as a podcast. So thanks for being with us. Today we're talking about caregiving. Connie Skidmore is here to talk with us a bit about the idea of caring for someone with dementia. Connie, thank you for this.
Thank you for having me.
So your experience is one that folks certainly could relate to, some folks at least, the idea that you have had a dementia affect your family.
Yes, indeed.
And you have been a person who has helped someone with dementia in caring for them, haven't you?
Yes. I think probably in this day and age, everybody has a family member, a loved one, a good friend, knows of firsthand someone with dementia. And probably we say to ourselves, oh my gosh, that must be so hard. I don't know how they do that. I'm so happy it's not me. I'm so happy it's not in my family, kind of thing.
Right.
And then when you get the news that it is now in your family, a little bit of panic kind of sets in. I think that if that's happening to anybody who's hearing something like this, the thing to remember, one of the things to really remember is that your loved one did not choose to have dementia. It's very difficult for them as well as it is for you, and there'll be times when you probably think, after you've heard the same question 17 times or the same story, that they're doing this on purpose, that they're being just, they're not. They didn't choose it, they don't like it any more than you do, probably even less, and certainly don't understand it.
Yeah, I can imagine that can be a terrifically difficult thing to try and manage for yourself as you're hearing those things again and again and the same questions. How do you manage that yourself in saying, okay, this is not their fault, just what you talked about, they didn't choose
You
this.
have to say that a lot.
Yeah. And you have to remind yourself
Exactly.
a lot. Right?
Exactly. And it's difficult as you go through that. Even when you can convince yourself of that, there still are times when another good thing to remember is that there's no such thing as a perfect caregiver. It's not going to happen. You're going to make mistakes and be frustrated, but you just have to, one day at a time.
Yeah. And you probably put pressure on yourself about being a caregiver to begin with, but when it's
Certainly.
a loved one, you feel even more, I would think. Is that true?
Yes, I do believe that's true because it's something that you can't walk away from. You can walk away from a friend's house whose grandmother is not well and say, wow, that's too bad. But when you're there and it's a 24/7 kind of thing, and every dementia patient is different, so there's no set pattern of things. In the beginning, it's good if you can set a daily pattern kind of thing, like, okay, today's is shower day, remember, that kind of thing.
I see.
But there's no sense in getting ahead of yourself. You don't ever want to say to your loved one, we've got a doctor's appointment next week, because next week is not a concept they understand. They understand you have a doctor's appointment, and they'll ask you 15 times the very first day what time they have to be ready to go. So you have to kind of pick and choose. Some people find it easy to keep a schedule, like maybe on your refrigerator. Doctor's appointment. If that's a few days off, don't put that on the schedule yet. Just wait until it's imminent. But other things, for daily things, Tuesday and Thursday are shower days. It's important that we remember those things. Every day we need to plan some time to take a little exercise, to take a walk, to do something like that, because that's important too. But don't get too far ahead of yourself. It won't help.
What you're really talking about is learning how to change the way in which you communicate, change
Exactly.
how you deliver information, isn't it?
Yes. And sometimes one of the things you might be good for you to remember is that it's okay, and in fact, it's even a good idea occasionally to tell a little white lie. If your loved one says, I need to go visit my mother, but your loved one's mother is deceased, you don't just say, we're not going to go visit her, she died, you know. You're going to say something like, let's call her later. We can't do it right now. We know that she'll be busy right now, but let's call her later and see maybe we can go later in the week.
I see.
Divert the whole thing, get it out of the way and off the table, and just don't bring it up again if you don't have to.
Imagine there's a point in the progression of dementia where that becomes necessary, and as a caregiver, you have to identify where that point is. I presume
Yes.
with help, of course, but the notion that talking about what's coming up in a week or two, there's a point at which that's no longer feasible, and you have to recognize when that is, right?
Yeah, you recognize fairly early, I think, when it comes to, I mean, the pattern of them repeating the same questions over and over and over again, or asking you the same time frames and kind of thing over and over and over again, that will pretty much tell you that it's best to just kind of back off from that. Let's save that for the last minute kind of thing.
Okay.
Another thing too that you want to think about is not rushing to help them. How do you want to say that? Not rushing to help them figure out something.
Yeah.
Give them an opportunity to maybe do that on their own. Don't finish every sentence for them just because, and that's a hard thing as a caregiver, because after a while you're tired of hearing them struggle with it and you want to just, let's get on with this kind of thing.
Right.
So it's kind of difficult to let them go at their own pace until you realize they've gone as far as they can go at that pace, I guess, and then it's
Sure.
time to jump in.
And I imagine there's plenty of communication with professionals, doctors and such, to help you identify, A, when you've reached a precipice of a turning point of some kind, and then secondly, how to change your behavior to help them. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I think so. One of the things that was most helpful to me, and I tell this to everybody who's beginning to struggle, is if you can find a good support group.
Yeah.
And I think nothing against our doctors in the time frame that they have in their office and that kind of thing. But when you're in a support group where other people are going through exactly the same things all the time, you'll learn a lot more from them, probably. I can remember one time I knew that my husband needed new jeans, and I took him to the store to try and get him new jeans, and I pulled like 3 or 4 pair off from the rack and sent him to the fitting room. And he didn't come back and didn't come back and didn't come back, and finally he came out and he had these jeans in his hands and he said, "What was I doing with these?" And I thought, okay, this obviously isn't going to work, and I can't buy 4 pair and take them home and bring back what we don't need. And I mentioned this at my support group, and one woman was sitting there and she said, "Sweatpants." I said, "Sweatpants?" She said, "Yep, they always fit. Buy sweatpants." And that's what he lived in after this, sweatpants, and in the summer, pull on shorts kind of things. But I'd have never, ever come up with that on my own.
Sure.
And I learned a lot more, I think, in the support group than he had a very good doctor who was very helpful. In fact, she guided me to a support group. But I think that a lot of them don't have the time to spend. They just need to tend to the part that they can handle, and
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes
you
sense.
might find that you're going to be left on your own. But
You actually are going in a direction that I was intending, which is to talk a little bit about the things that a caregiver has to do for themselves, right? I mean, certainly you're in a position to help someone who needs it, but you need some respite, you need some ways to help yourself too, don't you?
you do. Like probably most everybody, my parents raised me to be self-sufficient and do it on your own. Don't ask for help unless you absolutely have to have it. Now is the time when you absolutely have to have it. and you should not be afraid to ask for help. Talk with your relatives, talk with your friends. But if someone says to you, "What can I do to help?" Tell them.
That might be hard to do sometimes.
And it is hard to do. And, just say, if you could just come over Wednesday afternoon and sit for an hour or two, or take him for a walk, take him out for a cup of coffee. Any number of little things like that you can still manage to do. But yes, somebody offers to help, take them up on it. And you also have to remember that you can't be a good caregiver if you're not taking care of yourself. So that's important too. When it's time for you to go to a doctor or go to a dentist or go to the beauty parlor, for heaven's sake, make the plans to do it and get someone to help you with it if need be.
That might be difficult sometimes for folks. Pride is in the way.
Oh, yeah.
That pressure we talked about, caring for a loved one. All of
Absolutely.
those things are at play here, right? But still, the respite is
And
important.
exercise is a very important thing, and it's an important thing for your loved one as well. So if you can come up with things that they still would enjoy doing, taking a walk, even if it's just around the block, or sitting outside in the sunshine for a change and walking through the garden, or maybe they even liked gardening, play in the dirt. Any number of little things like that you can come up with. A trip to the library, even to look through books and pictures of museums. Any number of things. It's good you've got to get out and you've got to move around a little bit.
And that exercises the mind and the body for
Yes.
both of you. Yeah.
Dancing
Yeah.
is a good thing. If you can turn on the music and talk them into standing up and dancing with you for a little while.
So was there ever a point where you felt the pressure and you needed to find a way to help yourself tone down that pressure some? And how did you do it?
That's kind of a tough one for me, because I don't think I think that fate intervened in a way in my having to be the caregiver, in that Bill ended up in the hospital for a little while, and then when they sent him home from the hospital, it was with the idea that I couldn't possibly take care of him at home the way our home was set up,
I see.
without having the amount of time that it would need to make the arrangements to do it. And so he went into an assisted living facility. I had thought perhaps it would just be for a little while until I could arrange things at home. And then everybody made it very clear to me. It was difficult to take him there and tell him he had to stay there. And everybody made it very clear that eventually I would have to take him there and again, and he would have to stay there. That was absolutely, positively going to happen, and why put both of us through it twice?
Right.
So he ended up at a time when I felt I still might have been able to handle him at home. That's a terrible thing to say, but be able to care for him on my own at home. Ended up in the facility, and in a way, perhaps it was even beneficial, because he maybe still had a little bit of memory enough to know that this was the way that it needed to be. His mother had dementia, and he had taken care of her somewhat. And I think in his case, in the early stages at least, he felt he knew what this was and knew what was happening. Now I'm second guessing all of this because I didn't ever finish my doctoral training, but it was just the idea sometimes of the way that he would react to things and act about things that gave you the feeling that he had an inkling, at least, of what was happening there. But
Well, you actually have taken us to a point where we will continue in our next episode of Creating Dementia Solutions, where we talk about the point at which you have been a caregiver, and then you do have a change in housing arrangement, a change in caregiving arrangement like you've described, where someone has gone to an assisted living, for example, and now you have to change your role, at least in your mind, what your role is, and we'll get to that in our next episode. So thanks for being with us. This is a Miles for Memories program where we're creating solutions for those impacted by dementia in Calhoun County through movement, programming, and research. Connie Skidmore, thank you.
Thank you.